not the title of my talk. It's interesting, and I'll fuse this in a moment, but let me start with my macro view, my philosophy. So what I've found is that we have an enormous amount of institutions that are old, antiquated, and folks that will do everything that they can to keep those intact. Just look at how politics are today. Pretty broken, right? Look at the state of capitalism today. And you sort of look at these things, they're around for a long time because as bad actors acquire a lot of wealth, they're able to control a lot of things. Capital markets, political systems, and the list goes on and on. And what I found is that there's no way to change any of that from the top. There really isn't, because these institutions, they're old, and they've got folks that want to keep them around for as long as they possibly can because they're sucking cash or income or some other value out of that. And then the rest of society tries to conform sort of around that. Like how do I sort of navigate and succeed in these antiquated institutions? And where I came away thinking is that, as far as I know, we are the most advanced species on the planet, right? Even though we're like, I don't know, 98.5% DNA overlap with a chimpanzee. With that power, in my personal opinion, comes an enormous sense of responsibility that we should care about future generations to come. It's that simple. Sounds super simple, but our actions don't sort of play out that way. And I grew up in the 80s on the East Coast. How big of a house can you get? How many cars can you drive? Like, get mine. And I had the opportunity to teach entrepreneurship at Stanford for the last 11 years. And what I found is Generation Z in particular tends to have a different point of view, which is that, yes, they want to succeed. They have lots of goals, but also they care about the environment. They care about each other. They have a bigger, broader understanding of that, right? So basically, I look at the world through two lenses. One, are we creating more opportunities, or are we creating more problems? And today we're creating more problems. I mean, pick your poison. Never mind about sustainability, emissions, the list goes on and on, right? So how does one person or anybody change that dynamic? So what I've come to love, and I think I've had it in my DNA, is the way to do that is from the bottom up. And the best way to do that is through entrepreneurship. Because starting new companies, and I wasn't a physics major, but I do believe in the second law of thermodynamics, right, which is entropy. And you think about, like, the universe in and of itself works that way. Like, eventually this planet is not going to be around. Our star is going to supernova. It's going to eviscerate literally every planet in our solar system. All that material will get refurbished. Gases, new planets will form. God knows what else happens, right? So I think society can benefit from getting rid of these antiquated systems and structures. And the only way to do that, I think, is from the bottom up. And why this slide starts out this way is that, in my opinion, if you believe that, AI is the most massive transformer to ignite the most amazing entrepreneurial revolution that society has ever seen. So that's what my talk is going to really focus on. So next slide, please. So if you look at, I kind of make this really bold statement, the greatest innovation, a little bit of hyperbole, but, innovation of fire was really all about energy, the wheel, movement, printing press, distribution of knowledge, right? Electricity, power, the industrial revolution, production, and the internet communication. And what we have now is a really interesting technology. This talk isn't really going to debate the policy merits. With any innovation, there's pros and cons. What you typically have are bad actors that abuse that, right? Like the right-wing nut job that went into Charlottesville and rammed this car and killed some woman. Like, you wouldn't outlaw cars. Unfortunately, just have a bad actor, right? But it gets back to my same thesis. If you basically have more responsible people and a more distributed society where there's not a big, powerful voice that's controlling humanity, right? It's distributed amongst new entrepreneurs, new types of businesses, new types of cultures, create new jobs, new economic opportunities to learn, right? And that's where, so I will always take time to speak up at UCSC, because when I speak, I'm really here to do one thing. I'm not selling anything on them. I'm trying to expand your mind. That's really all that I'm trying to do, right? Be yourself, creativity, right? And exercise that. So I believe if we plant enough seeds, and there's seeds here in this room, Some of you will grow up, create really great companies, and go on to do great things. And I think that that chain reaction can occur. And so, yes, there are a lot of huge issues around artificial intelligence, the consumption of water, the consumption of electricity, data centers. I get all that. But the issue is like, this wave is hitting the shore now. It's going to hit, right? So what I've tried to do is understand, and I think the biggest thing that I can bring are like understanding these technological shifts, and then how to accrue intellectual capital and how to apply that going forward. And that's going to be the thesis of my talk. Next slide, please. So everything starts with intellectual curiosity, period. If you want to see successful people, it's those that start with both two things, an intellectual curiosity, and then the desire and the ability to actually start to apply it, right? If you go to my LinkedIn, it looks amazing. It does. I have more failures than successes, right? And I try to think of those more as learning lessons, right? Because if you're not pushing the envelope and you're not failing, then you're not learning, right? And so it's really, my dad was a guidance counselor at the high school, super creative guy, bought an Apple IIe, and he basically, there was a book called What Color's Your Parachute? I think it's still around today. Helps people learn like what aptitude would best suit their career path. And he found a mainframe computer. We had an Apple IIe, this thing called a modem. So you take your phone, your landline phone, and you put it into this thing, it would crack and buzz, and then it would connect into this mainframe. And I remember seeing these characters roll across the screen. And I'm like, holy shit, like this is magical. What's going on here? And it just captured my imagination. People have different imaginations. My youngest daughter happens to be a really good singer-songwriter. I am tone deaf and don't have any, 1/100th of the skill sets he has, right? To literally like focus on that, right? This happened to be technology for me, but it's going to manifest itself in a little bit different direction. So next slide, please. From that beginning, I went to college, and college was basically sex, drugs, rock and roll, as much of it as I could get. Did learn a few things about economics, and I took some computer science courses. I wanted to be a software engineer. Loved it. And when I got out of college, I started as a software test engineer at this time when the personal computer was just starting. So that was like a big wave, right? Information technology showing up at your home and at the office that you worked at. So I aligned my career with that shift. So as I started out as a software test engineer, and then I got into software engineering, we're hiring people from MIT. My math is good. My math's nowhere near MIT good. So you can probably tell I'm kind of a type A person, and I'm sitting next to somebody, they're coding faster and better than I am. And so one of the takeaways from this talk is like the importance of building relationships. Your network is going to be critical. I've relied on it throughout my entire career. I still do it today. I could give a separate talk on that, what that means. But the vice president of the group there was a vice president at Atari here in Sunnyvale. He worked for Nolan Bushnell. And I said, George, I'm really frustrated. I think I can be an average programmer. I don't want to have a life that's of mediocrity, right? Being average. So he's like, what do you want to do with your life, Toby? I said, I want to be a vice president, a general manager. I want to run my own business someday. He's like, great, go into product management. So what product management is basically, you're kind of a mini CEO. Your job is to define a need in the marketplace. You have to write these things called requirements. And then you work with engineers that build a product. But then you also have to work with like marketing, because your product needs to get marketed. So you learn about marketing. Hey, it needs to be sold. You guess what? You work with sales and learn how sales works. Hey, your finance team cares about how much revenue you're going to generate and any profit. So you start learning about finance and all of it. So it's a really good training ground as I began to move. So my inside joke is what I do with mediocre programmers to make them product managers. But the net of it was I just, for me, learning coding syntax, one, it was really hard conceptually to understand. And then two, like, I just didn't want to be sitting in front of a screen like through my entire career. So, however, what did happen though when I was working at that company was that I think this is where entrepreneurial DNA starts. It begins with, do you have a passion for solving problems? Do you have a passion for understanding and meeting customer needs? So I'll give you the earliest version of where I think that happened for me. So I started software engineering, and then they shut our electronics group down because the IBM PC won. This company I was working for created this cool new product called Cabbage Patch Dolls. Everybody wanted them. They were supposed to be all unique, and you got a birth certificate with them. And I was young, and they wanted to keep me, so I got moved into being a project manager. So I was dealing with all the production schedules of making these dolls in China, and I was intellectually curious. I wanted to learn like what's going on. So I'd go to our toy shows and see like buyers, like the time things were sold in toy stores, right? What are they looking for? Like what do they buy? I wanted to learn about that part of the process. And then I would track like, okay, what got bought? What did we fulfill? Come to find out, like 10% of orders we didn't fulfill because we couldn't produce the products fast enough. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like if we could solve that problem, that'd probably be a lot of value for the company I'm working at. And no one asked me to do that, by the way. I just literally had like project manager schedules and critical path stuff I print on a big HP printer, right? Just a little database, didn't have to do any programming, and I like put in all of our schedules, all the materials, because a Cabbage Patch doll has a rotor-molded head, it's got some injection molded parts, and they all have different outfits. Fabric for the body, and an R&D team would create all kinds of cool accessories, right? So I started looking at like when these buyers would be buying when they want. So I went to our R&D team. I said, hey, do you guys realize that 10% of everything you make doesn't end up on the shelf? They're like, what? We never knew that, Toby. And I said, hey, if you want, use my database. So as you're designing things, these are the buying windows, and you actually can design stuff that we can actually produce in that time frame, right? That was like the earliest manifestation of that. And I think like, what was it? Really trying to solve a problem, right? And it was kind of an important problem to start solving, right? So I think that's where my entrepreneurial journey started. Also being like a restless soul. Like I just don't like status quo. I think that society and the world, time is moving, and you should try to make the best of that time, right? So, and I wanted to be the best at whatever I did. Next slide, please. So that taught me, and I ended up moving in this product manager role. And I ended up at this company called Novell. Again, I'm really dating myself in this talk. Cabbage Patch Dolls, Novell. Novell has this thing called the network operating system. They don't have those anymore. You have basically the cloud, right? At the time, though, there was no cloud, there was no internet. So companies, we had 86% market share. This network operating system sat inside your company, and these personal computers connected to it. They were usually wired in, believe it or not. And then so people could share files, they could share a printer, they could access data, legacy data, and all that great stuff. What I learned here, though, was that as powerful as this technology was, one, we had a great CEO, right? So working for somebody that you really love and admire and respect, that can help teach you things, is another really important lesson, right? And sometimes that's, hey, they may not be perfect, but like, God, these things are area I'm like learning a lot. So I've always tried to like, hey, what can I learn in every scenario that I'm in? And so what I learned at Novell was the importance of leadership and the importance of a really good CEO. So our old CEO was amazing. Bill, we're the third largest software company in the world, bigger than Oracle. I think it was Microsoft. We're bigger than SAP. And then that CEO left. New CEO comes on board. Extremely arrogant, didn't know our product, didn't know our customers, didn't really care about our product or our customers, didn't care about our culture. And started basically, and at the time I was like, 31, and he was like 55, went to Princeton. I went to Southern Connecticut State University. And I'm like, God, this can't be right. And then the people he was hiring in there, and the internet just being more. So what I started to do, going back to like my intellectual curiosity, wanting to solve problems. So I'd meet with lots of our large customers, Ford Motor Company, Amgen, American Express, all the Fortune 100 companies were using NetWare. And I'd sit down and talk about, their investment in information technology. And what I found was that they look, Toby, we're getting a lot of pressure from Microsoft NT Server at the time, but they're like, here's what's going on. I have massive heterogeneous systems. So at the time, people have like different Dell PCs, Gateway PCs, IBM PCs, different software. Those software products were proprietary. Today, everything runs off your browser, but not back then. So a developer would have a piece of client ran on your workstation. The software backend ran inside your company's building. Today, that's all in the cloud. And everything was different. So like Toby, every dollar I spend in information technology, more and more is going to support it. So my value is dropping in that investment. So that stuck with me. It'd be like this. If you went in your home and your appliances ran on different voltages, how whack would that be, right? That was information technology. So when I downloaded my first web browser, what most people saw was, oh yeah, instead of printing my brochure, I put a web page up. I saw the answer to that customer problem, which was an interface to all of this heterogeneity and a vision for what this is. The first insight I had was like, oh, PCs are gonna change the world, which they did. The second one was like, wow, information technology is gonna go through a radical shift. And at the time, when I had this vision of creating the world's largest web development company, trust me, it's like today with AI. I don't really know, is it a fad? Very few people understood what this was going to happen. And those that delayed aren't around anymore, right? Or they're barely a shadow of their former self because they didn't see basically the rise of the digital economy, right? And so here what I learned was that there was an underlying piece of like how Novell succeeded. So the product was good, but networking was really complex. So the CEO there, the good one, said, I have to remove complexity. Complexity means slower adoption. And complexity comes in two forms, cost and time. They both equal to cost, but there's two elements of that. And so he created the Certified Network Engineering Program. Basically, it was an army of people that were trained to install and administer networks. And at the time, like, you had to like insert a network interface card into your PC. You had jumpers on that thing. Like, it was nuts, right? He wanted to remove all that from the customer value proposition so it could be adopted. So at the time, software sold through resellers, gold, platinum, and authorized resellers. And he basically said like, okay, my product's great. If you want to carry it, you have to have a certain number of CNEs on staff to authorize to sell my product. So if I'm trying to convince Kurt here about, hey, you got this company, you got these PCs, then buy larger hard drives for them, get NetWare, it'll do everything for you. And here's Melina over here, she's my certified network engineer, have you up and running. So remove that cost barrier, right? And the company exploded. The product was good, but it was really underlying what was the real need to accelerate this growth. So when I started US Web, basically what we looked at was, one, we started building sites. There's no way you can scale that. So if you go back to the NetWare story, the key was like, where does the body of expertise lie? And at the time, there were small companies doing early web projects. So there was a little Atlanta office with 7 people doing work for Coca-Cola. There was a little group in Milwaukee, Wisconsin doing work for Harley Davidson. And so what we ended up doing is basically an arbitrage play, and I acquired 44 companies in the span of 2 years. And these were like anywhere from 4 to 8 person companies. What was I buying? I was buying expertise, but also they had these amazing blue chip customers. So the thesis is this: our internet budget's gonna go up or down or stay flat? I think they're gonna go up, right? Is Deloitte going to get that work, or this group already in here doing really great web work for Coca-Cola or Anderson Consulting, right? So we basically, and then on top of that, 100% organic growth. Now, I'm a product guy. I never ran a professional services business, right? But I understood what the problem and the need was. Like, that's more important than having come out of like Booz Allen or McKinsey or somewhere else, right? Because what you'll find is like there's a handful of metrics that really matter at the end of the day. You really understand the customer need underlying that, right? And so had the opportunity. In 2 years we went public, and in 4 years I retired early. We're doing $1 billion in revenue and profitable, operating 17 countries around the world. As I said, I'm a really restless soul, got really bored. Next slide, please. And as going on to that US web story here, that was like the second major paradigm shift, right? And each of these slides at the bottom here, I'll send you guys the deck. It should basically come around like there's a little like key takeaway from everything, right? The biggest fortunes are usually built on top of a platform shift, not by inventing the platform itself. So yeah, there's some dudes at OpenAI or Anthropic. Like the internet was one person, the web. It was this guy named Tim Berners-Lee that worked in this research facility out in Geneva, Switzerland called CERN that invented HTML and a little transport protocol underneath it called HTTP. That was it, right? But who saw that shift? A guy named Jeff Bezos, a guy by the name Mark Benioff. Like the list goes on and on. They didn't invent the internet. They understood what was happening, right? And that's sort of leading up to this talk today, which is like, hey, I didn't invent the internet, right? But starting to see the implications of it and what new opportunities are going to exist. How does the world get recast around this paradigm shift? So those that saw that, like one of my first meetings was with Louis Borders' daughter, Borders Bookstore. I think there's only one left up in San Carlos. And I said, hey, you know, what's your digital strategy? Toby, we're not really worried about that. I'm like, are you guys worried about Amazon? Not at all, right? Met with an executive at Blockbuster. Same thing, what's your digital strategy? We don't really have one. Are you guys worried about Netflix? Who's Netflix, right? And like, they're just not around anymore, right? Because they missed the shift that was occurring, right? So the understanding need is still there, but how the application of that, right? And understanding and really all of these things are really tools at the end of the day, right? Some are bigger, some are smaller, right? And if you were in school taking algebra, you probably had an HB calculator. The kid next to you didn't have an abacus, right? It's how to use better tools. When people roof today, I used to work with my dad with a hammer. People got nail guns right now, right? So on a fundamental level, I'd like to think of it more from a tool perspective, which is how do I use this, right? Going back to the same sets of principles, are there needs in the marketplace that I can address? And how can I do it better? And the reason why AI is so powerful, I'll let the cat out of the bag a little bit, is because anybody can use it and do it. That's going to be the punchline at the end of this talk. Next slide, please. Oh, also get to be in a Rolling Stone magazine, which is a whole separate talk. Next. So, had the opportunity to teach at Stanford 2 entrepreneurship courses. And what I loved in the early days of Stanford is we had this amazing president called John Hennessy, who was an Intel engineer, super radical, out-of-the-box thinker. Most educational institutions are really bad, boring, red tape, make life miserable for people. He understood hey, what matters most here? What is my institution made out of? It's basically my instructors and the content, right? And so he focused, yes, he got the world's best PhDs in the world. I'm far from a PhD, right? I barely got a Bachelor of Science degree. But what I did bring into the classroom was real world experience, and that's what he valued, right? And so basically with that opportunity is that I could give lectures on valuations, anything you want. You can get them in a standard book, but what I walked away from, one of the courses I taught was MSNE 472, Entrepreneurial Thought Leadership. And of course, Stanford could bring in some of the most gifted speakers, right? Most talented entrepreneurs and investors. And I got to interview them. Kevin Systrom, the founder of Instagram, right? That was built before AI, right? And so what you start to notice, there are certain patterns that emerge, right? Certain patterns in nature, certain patterns in business, certain patterns in entrepreneurship. And it's crazy because as I worked with companies, how much noise infects CEOs, how much noise infects board of directors, and get completely off into the weeds all the time, right? And I'm going to share a failure story that I was associated with, right? Tried to get Alexi to buy my stock, but he wouldn't do it. So I kind of call it the 3 R's. At the top level, it's the right product for the right customer at the right time. It sounds super easy to do, but there's actually a lot of underlying components to this. And that when I worked for Elon before he went crazy, was one of the things he said 2 things to me that really resonated. One was we were talking about sustainability. And basically he was look, Toby, no one's going to buy inferior products that cost more. And that sort of stuck with me. And then what I saw him really focus on was when Bill Clinton ran for office, his tagline was, "Is the economy stupid?" Because the economy was doing so bad, right? So what I learned here, it's the product stupid. You can have the best marketing, the best brand, the best CEO, the best CFO, all those things in between, right? At the end of the day, if your product isn't meeting customer need, right, in a way that basically for an investor needs to have some differentiation because they're looking to create enterprise value, right? It's as simple as that. They want a return on their investment. So they're looking for trying to look into their crystal ball. Alexi does this all the time at Santa Cruz Ventures. What makes this company special today, right? What are the early signs? It's hard when you're an early investor, but there are certain signals that go around that. And today, all of this can collapse with AI. It doesn't mean people get replaced, but it does mean the skill set needed, the organizational structure going forward is going to change. There's a reason why there aren't a lot of blacksmiths around today. I don't think any of us showed up in a horse, right? So that's the opportunities to understand where that wave is and how do I ride it? How do I leverage this tool? How do I leverage this technology going forward? So fundamentals never changed, and too much of this in the old days took too much time and money. I can't do anything, I can't raise any money, all of that stuff. Literally, I'm going to go through organizational structures aren't going to look the same as they do today. org charts aren't going to look the same as they do today. The job requirements and the roles aren't going to look as the same as they do today. And I'll paint a little bit of a picture in a moment. Next slide, please. So this is a good example of had the opportunity to be the number 2 at Solar City, went through my second IPO. And when I sat there and was looking at what the opportunity was, and the reason that I ended up going there, one, obviously would love to change the world and use less petroleum, right? That's pretty obvious. But more importantly, it was really all about being a student of entrepreneurship. Like, what do they have that's unique? Why are they going to become number 1? And how can I help them, explode the value of this company? And what they had at the time was what the market needed, which was a fully integrated product to the market. So at the time, you had people that could install for you, but you had to have a bunch of cash to pay for that. You could just work with a marketing agency, and then they would set you up with what's called an EPG, an engineering procurement and construction company. But then you had to get it financed. The early days Sunrun, all they did was finance. So you basically like think Apple. Apple was great because not only the product's great, but they're all integrated. Like the experience is beautiful, right? And it delivers value for you. Just look what they did with the iPod. Like they changed the entire industry. Before that, I was on Napster. I'm downloading music. There's a Logitech MP3 player. The thing had 1 million buttons and switches on. I'm trying to download the music in there. And Apple's basically like this little cube, 1,000 songs in your pocket. But the hard work behind the back end of that is to get the record labels of the industry around that and then create literally a wheel and a button. That was it, right? Not my Logitech million types of things, right? What's the need in the marketplace and being able to solve those problems? So here was the first company that had the fully integrated model, right? And solar is complex, unfortunately. You got to get permitted. There's a lot of back and forth with the customer. And so being able to try to remove as much of that complexity as possible, where, hey, you just buy from us, we install it for you, we back that up, we stand behind this product for 20 years, right? And basically, oh yeah, by the way, it's cost you less than what you're paying PG&E today, right? And no amount of money. That's a pretty cool value proposition, right? And I'll tell you where, and then I told them I'd stay 2 years, which I did. Then I got a call to come back when Tesla was talking to them. And the reason that I left was that there was too much pressure to grow at a rate that was not sustainable. We were already operating at the lowest cost of acquisition, the lowest install cost. And so if you're going to double every year, then you literally got to double your sales force. You got to double your installers. And there's no way in hell that your costs aren't going to drop because those people aren't going to be as efficient as you if you're hiring 1,000 people a month, right? Can you train them, right? So with Elon's business, sure, like that's manufacturing. Like the company was massively hemorrhaging cash. The Model 3 came out, and that's what changed the profitability, right? All this tooling they built to take capacity, and then your marginal cost structure is very different, right? This was not the type of business to do that. And unfortunately, like what I predicted ended up coming true. But what's unfortunate about all of this is that that company could be doing amazing work today. If you think about Solar City, its largest shareholder was Elon Musk, owned 20% of the company. And so the company would have had a unique relationship with Tesla to provide integrated power wall. They could have expanded into EV charging for your home and for your business, right? Imagine several people left to start finance companies. One of them was GoodLead, used to be Lone Pal. That company's worth like $12 billion today. They could have provided their own finance product, really like continue to make it easy for people to adopt sustainable energy, right? But when you start to lose sight of your customers, they said, oh, we're gonna buy a solar panel manufacturer, and that probably was like the thing that ended up tanking them, right? They couldn't survive that. So they were burning and bleeding cash and had no choice but to merge with Tesla. Next slide, please. So where this is all going is two other kind of important slides. So like what didn't work? So I spent a lot of time at Cruise County. And Alexa asked me this question. I was like, hey, you're a pretty smart guy. Like it didn't succeed. And like, what didn't you see? And like the learning lesson there was do your homework. Understand, like this is not a knock on the two co-founders. They're amazing guys, but I basically didn't do my homework and trusted what their vision of the market was. So it's unvetted, right? Oh, our product is going to sell protective foam in the packaging market, which is a $30 billion market. So today when you get something, it's usually expanded polyethylene. It'll cushion your TV, your laptop or whatever, right? Cushioning foam's there like a shock absorber. So when it's going through Amazon, it's got to pass these drop tests, and the foam absorbs that energy. It doesn't transfer into the item and break it. And so we raised a lot of money. We raised over $30 million, right? And didn't make it. And the issue was, and the learning lesson here is that understand the problem that you're solving and quickly get to what your product can and can't do. And if it can't do what you need it to do, then you need to make a pivot really quickly, right? Don't basically, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing, expecting a different result, right? Oh, it's this, it's that. No, like focus on the core issue. We don't have sales, right? Okay, is there a sales problem? I don't know. I've sold a lot of stuff in my career, like never had a problem selling anything, but like I can't hold a gun to a customer's head when my product isn't meeting their needs. Toby, it fails our drop tests. Our product also is really good R value. So for cold chain, you get a meal kit, right? It'd be nice to have cruise foam in there. The problem was that what the largest provider today is a company called TemperPak. They have or AB liners. So basically it's one panel, but they have two creases in them. So one goes in the bottom, the side, the top stays open, and then the second panel goes in the side, the three sides. You put your stuff, refrigerant, close it, right? Low operational cost. Not cruise foam. Ours had to be die cut. You're adding more costs because some third party has to do that. Oh, and then it gets to the operations people, and they're like, wait a minute, it's going to cost me more to I get your stuff in a Jenga puzzle on a pallet, and I got to like take 6 panels and put it in here. You know how much cost you're adding, Toby, to my back end, right? So the point is like, you've got to like laser focus on that product. What is it that customer needs? Now, let me add one other important thing here, because I do have, although I believe in customer discovery, I think it has to be nuanced. So, for example, what need ends up being is where you're anticipating what the customer needs. If I did a customer discovery session here, you'd all be giving me different ideas and thoughts, right? Are they good? Are you really my customer? Do you really know what you're talking about, right? Versus what Elon saw at Tesla was basically like understood the technology curve of lithium ion battery storage. What he saw was like the cost is going to radically come down, and the amount of energy that I can put in a certain geometry is going to go up. I could put this into a transportation car, automobile, right? So he saw like, God, if I can give them, and what he built, the people didn't buy it because it was green, trust me. Some did, but most bought it because it transformed the driving experience. That's why. The thing drove itself. It had like the most insane power. It could blow away any combustion engine on the planet, right? But he saw that need, like if I can basically take this technology, lithium ion, and the cost curve's gonna look like this, and the size of it, and its ability of how much energy, because old days, like your electric car maybe could go 20 or 30 miles at best, not like 300, right? And all electric cars beforehand like looked and performed like shit, right? And he bought it, and then he also thought out like, oh, anticipated customer problem, charging anxiety. Built out the largest, until the best today, supercharging network, right? What Steve Jobs saw at Apple was that basically, so there's this thing called Moore's Law, and basically CPU cycles double every 18 months. So like my iPhone right there, my first programming course was on an IBM mainframe 360, 370. It was the size of this room. I was on punch cards, and the CPU power of that was less than what's on my iPhone today, right? Memory was also really expensive. So what Steve, like how many people were going around in a focus group? I want a computer that runs in the palm of my hand right now, where is it, right? But he saw a digital economy beginning to emerge, right? Mobile at the time was like, oh, I got a laptop, right? Steve had a vision for like what a soccer mom would look like, traveling business person. You're gonna wanna book a room, sell stock, app store, all of it, right? Because the technology, he saw basically that inflection point. CPU cycles are actually gonna be here, gonna be able to do that, and memory's gonna be cheap, and the cost structure is going to be able to meet the market need that I have, right? So it's a little bit of like, again, not that you can't succeed in kind of a want, but lots of times it's why really good product people will spend time like on Amazon or Reddit reviews, looking for like people screaming and bitching about something. That's a need, right? Getting someone in a focus group, hey, I want to talk to you about your CRM today and what's working and what's not working, right? yeah, you might be opinionated. Am I getting good advice on that? Or like my surfing wax, right? If I don't surf, people are telling me stuff from the outside. So that really is like one of the most important fundamental components of this. Next slide, please. So to get in the heart of this, so where does AI come into all of this, right? I talked at the top, like it's so transformational. It is going to ignite the greatest entrepreneurial revolution in the history of mankind. That's what I believe. Quote me on that, right? So you have a person that's going to be 65 in November. I told you I was a really shitty coder. The last a line of code I wrote was 1985, and it was terrible. And I always wanted to be a really good software engineer because, again, creating these types of products was expensive. I had to hire a software engineer. I'm going to be held hostage by that person. It's going to cost me a lot of money. And so basically built like 75% of an enterprise grade product myself. And I didn't write one line of code, right? Anybody can do it if you've got a level of intellectual curiosity, right? And willing to to spend some time and energy thinking and learning. Trust me, like probably 90% of the students are way smarter than I am, right? And if I can figure it out, there's definitely a way you can easily figure that out. But I also like spent my time. I went out and found a really good CTO that I could learn from. I spent Saturday with another friend of mine doing a code pairing, right? I took a whole Saturday because I want to be really good at what I do, right? And so the problem that Brand Capsule solves, AI Discovery Intelligence, is that we're in a really unique time right now because growth is going through a transformational shift for every company. Unless your business 100% relies on referral, maybe if so, like that's great. You'll probably be immune to this. But for the last 25 years, you built a website, this company Google collected tolls on both sides of the transaction. You basically, your site got crawled, it got indexed, and then Google would rank it. Someone would go to a Google page, type something in, Google would give you some blue links, organic links and paid links. Then you as a consumer then would make that decision, which brand you were interested in and your buying journey. You didn't like what you hit, you might go backwards, there might be a page 2. Basically, all of that is getting eviscerated. SEO people that I talk to, like Toby, I'm not getting the performance I used to get from my dollar of SEO investment. Less people are coming to my site and my revenue is either flat or going down, right? And the reason for that is that because the adoption of AI chat, I guarantee you everyone in this room is using their favorite AI chat, Claude or GPT or what have you. If you're not, you're going to be using it pretty after this talk, I guarantee you. But what that's changing though is that, and there's a couple things that are happening right now. One is, so not only is discovery changing, so what's happening is that, here's another provocative statement, AI is mediating marketplaces. Just think about that, mediating, it's deciding what a marketplace looks like. Because a potential buyer types something in GPT, and then it goes, bam, here's the answer. You're either in there or you're not. If you're not in that answer, that customer doesn't know about you. It's as simple as that. So GPT today handles 2.5 billion prompts a day, and Bain just did a study, 9.8% are vendor selection related. That's 248 million a day, right? Is that number gonna go up or down? No. It's gonna go up, right? So if your brand isn't seen by LLMs or seen, then your market is going to get smaller and smaller, especially if you relied on typical marketing channels, push programs, campaigns, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm being insanely draconian. It is starting to happen. Industries, the inflection point is going to be different across that. But I'm just giving you a macro view, right? You can take the information and use it how you want to see that. So I started thinking about that problem over a year ago, which is like, yeah, what is the future of websites if AI chat is going to answer questions for the user? So not only is discovery happening there, 50 to 80% of the buying journey happens there. Because once a user goes, oh, tree wax comes up, tell me more about that. Like, how does it compare to sex wax or whatever? So they're already starting the purchase decision in AI chat. And then they might already conclude it there, or they might be very close to there before you even get a phone call or an email or someone comes to your website. On top of that, consumers, buyers, trust their AI chat. So it's a trusted source. they're discovering, and then they're starting to basically investigate what I want to buy, right? That's all happening in AI chat. That's crazy. Now, there's a good side to this coin, and this might just be my altruistic self. LLMs are different than Google. Google's mantra was like, we do no evil. They're like the most evil company on the planet. Sorry for anyone who works at Google. Just personal opinion. Doesn't represent Santa Cruz Works. But basically, they and it's radical. So they used to say, we are just going to help facilitate the open web, and that's sort of what their ranking did. Although they charged you to basically show up in a paid search, now they're going away with that. They're using Gemini summary right now to then further abstract from the open web. Right? Didn't tell anyone that. There's if everyone wants the article, I'll send you. It's a New York Times article. So LLMs, I think, are going to have a hard time potentially monetizing on advertising. And here's why. So we've all come to trust it and rely on it. My wife takes pictures of our plants, like, hey, this doesn't look healthy. Like, how should I prune it? What should I do? A million different use cases for this stuff, right? Like, my ozonator wasn't working and I like it. I don't want to put chlorine in my pool. And normally I have to call a guy. It's $1,000 to come look. I open the thing up, take a picture. Hey, what's going on here?
Buy new ozonator. You can. How do I install it? All the instructions, install it myself. Like, cost me like $100 instead of like
$1,000, right? But what I'm getting at is that it has one job, is to basically answer your question the best, most unbiased way it can. Because if it starts not doing that, then it's less valuable to you. So imagine you give it an algebra problem. What if I got it wrong? Or it didn't do the right rounding, on some decimal, right? Or you asked it when did California become a state and it was wrong there, right? Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. You're not gonna probably use that, right? So now when you're asking it about products, for it to be biased, I think introduces a level of it tainting itself, right? So I believe, and this could just be like me on LSD, that I think for once in the history of capitalism, brands could potentially succeed not based on the size of their marketing budget, but on the quality of their brand. Like, how cool would that be? So what we do is super simple. So what happens is that, so LLMs are here. And so what happens when you type something, say brand related, about hey, what's a good eco surf wax? So what it starts doing is you're typing, this happens in milliseconds, it's parsing, looking at what you're saying. Behind all these AI systems are what are called vector databases. The name isn't really important. What is important, though, is that the way these things work is that similar companies are grouped in certain areas in these vector databases. Dog food companies, ERP companies, solar companies, surf wax companies, all of it. So as you're typing, because obviously it ingested the entire web, it ingested every book, right? So how does it organize all that information, right? So, or the number 7, or dogs or cats, right? So as you're typing something, and there's areas where the LLM is going to be a black box, and there's areas where it's going to be transparent. Black box is never going to tell you how it's reasoning. That's part of their magic. But it will tell you what it's looking at to construct that answer. So what happens is there's 2 modes of how LLMs work today. One is if you ask it that algebra question, all the information is internal to the model. So basically, I have the data, and I have the AI reasoning, and then I have this generative language, boom, done. For an open-ended question like, hey, I'm a 60-year-old surfer, and the wax I use I don't think is good for the planet, what options do I have, right? For that, every LLM or your favorite chat looks internal to the model, and then does what's called a web search, because it wants to answer it right. So on the back end, it's looking at, who's eligible to be in this answer? It's never going to tell you that. So it starts to build eligibility. And it has some brands that it starts, I want to go look at some of these brands because, they've been around for a while. So it's starting to look at when were these types of companies found? All stuff in milliseconds, right? And then it goes, boom, it collapses, and then the answer is you. Just mediate an entire marketplace for you, right? So what we're focused on is that, so the LLM is here, your brand is here, there's a gap, right? So we focus on understanding how the LLM sees you, and then give you recommendations that are grounded in either questions you're not performing in or models that you're not performing in, and what you should be doing to basically, which is really not game the system, but help the LLM have the right information, because it will answer it better. Right now it's only using bits and pieces, right? Our job's to tell you like, okay, how to basically give it better information so it could better represent you, so you are showing up in those answers. Next slide, please. But basically, this company is an enterprise grade product. Would have cost me literally over $2 million, 8 to 10 engineers, and 18 months of time that a part-time CEO and a crazy, restless soul built in 4.5 months. And now, and generating within 3 weeks, $50,000 of ARR. And capital's tough, right? So most of it's a very small team. I've got some interns and said, look, we're going to raise some money in the fall, but I want to prove that we have a real product and a real market, like real product market fit. Because when I take money from anybody, even an investor, I want to feel like they're making a good decision, and I want to have a very high likelihood that I can return money commensurate with the risk that they're taking. So the further I can get along in validating that, then the better off like everybody wins, right? I just don't like zero sum game. Too many people like think too much in like mutually exclusive activities. Two things can be true at the same time, right? So I've been able to basically like have virtually the lowest investment I've ever made into a company that got to basically 50,000 in ARR because of the power of AI. And it is open to any and everybody. I just was intellectually curious. Like, how'd I find out about vector databases? Like, I read some shit about it, right? I don't have to be an expert. Like, I'm not, if you want to start getting into technical details about like Neo versus Postgres, I can just tell you what a vector database is, right? But it doesn't matter, that's also important. So I gotta wrap up here. So basically, build era is the most important thing you can bring to this is your experience. That's what's not commoditizable. My 40 years of experience got brought into this. I've like run marketing and sales organizations. I have that pain point of like top of funnel, like I'm gonna get fired if I don't hit this revenue number, right? So having that visceral experience versus a software engineer doesn't know anything about a discovery tool. I just like looking at your product requirement. So all of that basically rolls into this ability where I think that the world is going to be made up of basically like we're going to need blue collar people that can install solar panels, HVAC systems, electricity, and all those things. They're going to be in great demand, right? Technical jobs. Then I think it's either two things, either super nonlinear thinker or you're a builder, right? We built everything on our own at Brand. That's what I told my team. Like, our org structure looks nothing like like you're a builder, you don't work at my company. We built our own CRM system, like F Salesforce, F HubSpot. You can build it faster, better, right? That's the power of it. You can build anything that you want. So my race right now is like anything's commoditizable. So I have to build out an intelligence layer that ends up being like someone that's building, oh, it's cheaper for me to use Toby's stuff than for me to build it myself. Like, that's the race, right? But you all bring unique perspectives. You have all unique intellectual capital that you run through your own experiences, right? And that's it. So happy to take some questions. Malia's giving me the hook wisely, but the bottom line here is that I see it as like a massive opportunity, a huge doors there waiting to be opened, right? And anything is possible based on your imagination. All right.
Thank you, Tony.